After the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, a portion of the inquiry met at the Hotel Majestic with a number of British diplomats to discuss the forming of a permanent institution. This meeting eventually led to the decision to join forces with a group of high-ranking officers of banking, manufacturing, trading, and finance companies led by Elihu Root, a powerful corporate lawyer who was also a former United States Secretary of War and leading advocate of America's entry into World War I. On July 29, 1921, the merged group filed a certification of incorporation, officially forming the Council on Foreign Relations, also known as a CFR. The CFR went on to build a membership comprised of the world's most powerful business leaders, politicians, and corporations. Among the corporate members are Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, BP Oil, General Electric, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Bloomberg, Rothschilds North America, and DynCorp International. You can find a complete list on the CFR website.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
George H.W. Bush was a director of the CFR from 1977 to 1979, and his Secretary of State, James Baker, is a current member. You might remember this clip from 2012 where Baker and Clinton joked about the plan to take out Iran.
There will also be many, many side effects, all of them adverse, from an Israeli strike. But at the end of the day, if we don't get it done the way the administration's working on it now, which I totally agree with, then we ought to take them out.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, we're working hard. We're working hard.
I said at the end of the day may be next year. It will be next year.
Kind of sounds like an inside joke, doesn't it? 1 year after this interview, the Obama administration attempted to initiate an attack on the Syrian government. This was designed to draw in Iran, which has a mutual defense agreement with Syria. Obama took an indirect route by funding and arming militants who then committed atrocities and blamed them on government forces. Sound familiar? Well, perhaps that's because Zbigniew Brzezinski was Obama's personal mentor.
Somebody who has over decades trained some of the most prominent foreign policy specialists, not just in the Democratic Party, but has trained a number who ended up in the Republican Party as well. He is one of our most outstanding scholars, one of our most outstanding thinkers. He has proven to be an outstanding friend and somebody who I've learned an immense amount from. And for him to support me in this campaign and then be willing to come out here to Iowa is a testimony to his generosity. So if everybody could please give Dr. Brzezinski another round of applause.
Bill Clinton is also a member of the council, and his Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, is currently serving on the board of directors. Madeleine Albright was in charge of the sanctions on Iraq that were in place during the entire Clinton administration.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Colin Powell, who led the charge to war with Iraq by presenting false evidence to the UN in 2003, is also currently on the CFR board of directors.
Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction. My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there.
George W. Bush's National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley, his Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and his Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson are all current members of the CFR. Henry Paulson, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, was the man behind the banker bailouts in 2008. Goldman Sachs, which just happens to be a corporate member of the CFR, was one of the primary beneficiaries of that bailout. Another CFR member, Robert Gates, was Secretary of Defense under both Bush and Obama. Obama's first National Security Advisor, James L. Jones, is a CFR member, as is Obama's second National Security Advisor, Tom DeNillen, his third National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, his second Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, his first Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, as was his first Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. John Kerry, Obama's second Secretary of State, acknowledged that he was a member of the CFR in a speech given at the Council in 2003, but he's no longer listed on the official roster. In the Senate, Dianne Feinstein is listed as a member, as is John McCain, Joe Lieberman, and former Senator Christopher Dodd. Christopher Dodd is currently the president of the Motion Picture Association of America. In that role, he was the driving force behind the SOPA and PIPA internet bills. 3 out of 6 of the current board members of the Federal Reserve, Daniel Tarullo, Jerome Powell, and Janet Yellen, are all publicly listed as members of the Council. This cozy relationship between the Federal Reserve and the CFR goes back to the very beginning. Paul Warburg was a founder of both organizations, and he held positions in both of them concurrently. He was a director of the Council from its creation in 1921 until his death in 1932, and he served on the Federal Reserve Board from 1921 to 1926. His son, James Warburg, who is also a CFR member, is most famous for the statement he made before the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations on February 17, 1950, in which he said, "We shall have world government whether we like it or not. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest." Carroll Quigley was an author and professor of history at Georgetown University. He was also a personal mentor to President Bill Clinton.
And then, as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor named Carroll Quigley.
Quigley specifically identified the CFR and the Institute of International Affairs as key hubs in this roundtable network, and he confirmed its close relationship to banking and finance. The Institute of International Affairs, also known as the Chatham House, is a sister organization of the CFR. It was created in 1920 by the British diplomats who attended the meeting at the Hotel Majestic in Paris in 1919. There are chapters of the Institute of International Affairs in Australia, Belgium, France, Italy, Portugal, Norway, Poland, Finland, Hungary, Sweden, New Zealand, South Africa, Nigeria, Pakistan, Singapore, Japan, and in other countries as well.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.